Welcome on in, WIP Daily. Joe Giglio with you, reacting to the NBA postseason, which, I mean, these series might be over. And by the time you watch this, we might be on the verge of the NBA Finals between the Nuggets and the Heat. No one saw this coming. Obviously, a lot of this affects the Sixers both now and in the future. A lot to get to. I want to talk about things we've learned from this NBA postseason, really how it could help the Sixers. They try to finally build a title contender here. All right. Thank everyone for listening. Of course, follow the show wherever you get your podcast, WIP Daily, and of course, watching the feed here on the 94 WIP YouTube page. And Tucker's with me. He'll jump on in a couple minutes here to talk about what he's feeling watching these playoffs. But four things are standing out to me that I feel like we've learned from the NBA postseason this year. And every year in every sport, there's kind of lessons in the postseason that I think could kind of manifest itself moving forward. Like, all right, this is what we learned. Now what? And one of them, and I think we probably need to see a little bit more evidence on this before it's like fully there, but it certainly feels like it's pretty much there. The NBA was the one season where the regular season was predictive almost always of the postseason. Number one seeds, number two seeds, that's who won the championship. Almost without fail. And every once in a while, there was a team, I go back to the 95 Rockets or something, whether it was injuries or it was kind of a weird year, but they were already champions. So you kind of knew, or the Warriors maybe last year, right? Like teams that already have been champions, they could kind of buck the trend. But for the most part, NBA champions and the way the bracket goes in the NBA playoffs has stayed pretty darn steady, which is the best teams are the best teams. And they have home court and they roll throughout. And this year is not that year. I mean, if with the Celtics down 0-3, the top three teams in the NBA by record, Bucks, Celtics, and the Sixers, are all not going to win the title. I mean, there you go. Yes, the number one seed in the West, the Nuggets, is rolling up 3-0 as we speak right now and probably going to be in the finals and will be the favorite to win it. But of course, we have now the 8-seed Heat, who are about to go to the finals, and we have a 7-seed Lakers who made it to the Western Conference Finals. I think we've reached the point now we could say the NBA regular season is no longer predictive. I think it's kind of a twofold thing. One, this was probably building that way for a while where teams just don't take it that seriously anymore, that they don't feel like home court matters that much anymore, where they could go win a game 6 or 7, whatever, on the road, and it's not like daunting. While back in the day, it used to be like, you got to get home court. You got to fight that way for home court. Now I don't think teams think of it that way, so they're not fighting tooth and nail. You add in load management, you add in sports science where teams are resting players back-to-backs. Like, it's just not thought of as it mattering as much anymore. So I think as we project this out, or for the Sixers as they build a team, specifically if they keep Joel Embiid and try to run it back with him, that has to be taken into consideration. Like, it's not about the regular season doesn't matter. We haven't yet reached hockey level here or baseball level where it really doesn't matter. We're probably, it's probably in terms of does it matter, hockey 1, baseball 2, and it used to be football and basketball, like they mattered. They were more predictive. The number one seed in the NFL, the bye week, whatever. Same thing with the NBA. It's moving away though. Like basketball is moving way more towards hockey and baseball, and that just get in. Just look what the Heat did. Just get in. That's the first thing that stood out to me. Just get in, and it doesn't matter anymore. The NBA regular season being predictive is dying. I mean it's so obvious watching this because it hasn't mattered. I mean, the Heat may win the whole thing. They were an 8 seed. They were down 11 points in a play-in game. And here they are up 3-0. The other thing that stood out to me is coaching. And I think NBA coaching, it tends to be one of those things where unless you have a great coach, an Eric Spoelstra, a Greg Popovich, a Phil Jackson, we can go down the line of the great coaches we've had over the last 20, 30 years or whatever. We just tend to pretend it doesn't matter at all, but it does. I think Mike Malone's done a nice job in Denver. I think Joe Mazzulla is actually holding back Boston. I thought that in the series they beat the Sixers. I thought Mazzulla was terrible until he made the adjustment in Game 6 to put Robert Williams in. He almost did nothing right in the game. I think Joe Mazzulla is a negative for the Celtics. I mean, you watch that series against the Heat, and it's like the Heat make 2 shots. The Celtics make 2 shots that kind of lead the Heat have from 14 to 8 or 9. And boom, timeout, Spoelstra. He's calming everyone down, and he's got everyone back on the same page. Meanwhile, Joe Mazzulla, I think it was game 1 or game 2 in Boston in the series, I mean, the Heat went on a run where they scored 40-something points in a quarter. He didn't take a timeout. He's just standing there. I mean, Joe Mazzulla, look, he's young. He may end up a good NBA coach. He's not a good NBA coach right now. I felt that last round watching him against Doc Rivers in the Sixers. He's just not a good coach, and he's costing his team. So the in-game coaching in the NBA playoffs matters more than I think we give it credit for. I'm not saying it's it makes what the Sixers did, canning Doc Rivers, maybe you feel better, I guess, a little bit if they get a good tactician, but it matters. We can't pretend it doesn't matter. Like wins and losses, it's not football. The scheme isn't the same. It's not like that. But you've seen in this postseason, coaching really can matter. And Eric Spoelstra is putting a just stamp on that. And on the other side, I mean, we may look back one day and say Spoelstra against Mazzulla was one of the biggest coaching mismatches ever. I mean, in the NBA postseason. I mean, that's how he's running circles around him. Circles. And that's why, and part of the reason why, the Heat are up 3-0. I mean, they're just dominating in that realm. So, the regular season not mattering is so obvious now at this point. Coaching really mattering when the playoffs start is also mattering a lot. And the other thing, and I'm curious what Tucker thinks on this, because the Sixers have big decisions to make on James Harden and everything they're going to do here. But one thing I've thought about a lot in this postseason is how much continuity matters. And I think about the two teams that are right now look like they're, if not locks, destined to play in the NBA Finals. They're on the verge of playing in the NBA Finals with the Nuggets and with the Miami Heat. And the word I come to is continuity. I think we're reaching the point where the put a team together on the fly era is over in the NBA. It was brief. It was gigantic. Obviously, it was about a decade long. Player empowerment. We're going to team up 2 or 3 stars. And in some cases, it worked. Like the Miami Heat obviously was a success. 4 trips to the finals, 2 titles. I would say a team like the Clippers has been a disaster, right? Like they haven't got to the finals, and I don't think they're close, with Kawhi and Paul George and all that. But I really think continuity matters. Look at the way the Miami Heat play. That's a team that is played together a lot of basketball. And they've added some pieces, like Kyle Lowry they added a couple years ago. But undrafted guys, you could tell like they got run and practice together. And it all kind of revolves around Jimmy Butler. But it's a culture, it's a scheme, it almost reminds you of a college program where it's like the example I would give is almost like Tom Izzo's Michigan State. They roll in a group of freshmen, they stay for 4 years, and by the end, they're probably in the Final Four. That's Miami. There's continuity there. And then I think about the Nuggets. The Nuggets drafted and developed basically all their players. Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, Michael Porter. It's a drafted and developed team. It's not a team that was free agents. I think Murray was probably their highest picked player. I guess, Aaron Gordon they acquired, and he was a highly picked player in the lottery for the Magic, all those years ago. But there are 3 guys, right? Like you think about their 3 drafted guys. Nikola Jokic, second round pick. Jamal Murray, like the 6th or 7th pick in the draft. Michael Porter, middle of the first round. Like they drafted and developed players. Mike Malone was telling a story the other day about how when Murray hurt his knee a couple of years ago, he was all upset and frustrated and emotional. And he said, I'm damaged goods. You guys are going to trade me. And Mike Malone said, no, you're our guy. You're one of our guys. And we got away from that in the NBA for so long where it just felt like, well, that stuff's just, that's Harry high school stuff. Just go get the best players, put a team together on the fly like an all-star team and go win. There's something to this. And I wonder from the Sixers perspective, they've evolved the roster a lot over the last 5 years, constantly going after the big fish and trying to do this, trying to do that. I wonder if there's some value, and I'm not sure what it means exactly for a specific player. I'm not saying, well, you got to give James Harden $200 million because of continuity, but there's something to the continuity of the Heat and the Nuggets. Tucker, I think we've got to the point where the idea of teams just putting together stars on the fly and saying, we're going to go win a title, I think it might be dead. Like there's real cohesion when you watch the Heat and the Nuggets. Other teams don't have that.
Yeah, and I think the other big thing is you kind of look at the Sixers and the way the whole process began. It was to borrow Brett Brown's term, well, it was to star hunt, right? Like they were looking for 2, 3 all NBA players that they could put together, and that's kind of how you won a decade ago. When you look at a team like the Miami Heat, the way the Golden State Warriors are put together, although that team was built internally until they got Kevin Durant. But you kind of look at it now, and you're right. Like it is continuity, and it's kind of a throwback to the way teams were maybe 20, 25 years ago before the Lakers kind of put Shaq and Kobe together. And then, Boston kind of took it to the extreme with their big 3. But you don't see teams doing that anymore. Like Jamal Murray is great, but he's not first team All NBA. And, they're a team built around one superstar. You look at the Miami Heat and what they're doing, and they're built around Jimmy Butler and, 8 or 9 undrafted free agents plus Bam Adebayo. And the way the Sixers have kind of built this team, the way this process has taken so long, they're almost antiquated now. Like they're built like a team that was built to win 5, 6, 7 years ago when they started this entire situation. And you look at what Miami's been able to do, you look at what Denver's been able to do, against teams like Los Angeles, who was built on the fly, right? Like they completely remade their roster at the trade deadline. Think about what Phoenix did when they brought in Kevin Durant and completely rebuilt their team around him midway through the season. Denver dispatched both of them. And now, obviously, they still have one more game to get through against Los Angeles, but those were two teams that everyone looked at and said, man, they're going to have a tough time against those guys. And they had no issue against either one of those teams. And I look at what Miami is able to do. And honestly, it makes me sick. Like, I think we all kind of rationalized the Sixers losing to the Celtics and said, well, they are a better team. Even though I think we felt maybe a little different earlier on in the series, the prevailing sentiment by the end was, well, even though they quit, even though they looked terrible, the Celtics were a better team. There may be no shame in losing them. Watching them get blown out last night, it made me feel the complete opposite. Like the Celtics aren't any good. And if they made the Sixers look like absolute frauds a week ago, beating them by 30 and running them out of the TD Garden, and Miami's doing the same to them, like how far away are the Sixers now? And if we want to talk about running it back and bringing back James Harden, I saw a report yesterday that there are people in the NBA who expect him to get a 4-year, $200 million contract, which no thanks. But if that's what they're going to do and they're going to run it back, you are so far behind the 8 ball. If you looked like that against the Celtics in the semifinals and the Celtics look like this against the Heat, you aren't even close.
Well, they're not. No, you're right. They're not close. And I saw that report too, which was just bananas. $200 million for James Harden over 4 years. Like, there are fireable offenses in every walk of life. Like whatever your job is, if you do something, you can get fired. $200 million for 4 years for James Harden at this point of his career, that should be a fireable offense. But Tucker's right. That Heat situation and what they're doing to the Celtics, it just like makes you feel like crap watching it. Like, man. Because, I think when the series ended, there was a feel like, the Sixers blew an opportunity to win the finals or go to the finals. And maybe instead it was just two really flawed teams playing each other. And it happened to be the Celtics, moving on that series. The last lesson that I've learned, and this I've been thinking about for a few years, but it continues to be cemented. And I don't think it's good for the game. I really don't think it's good for the product, for the sport, for people watching it, for fans. It's just a 3-point shooting contest. That's basketball now. If I sound like an old man yelling on my lawn, that's fine. That's the NBA. I'm telling you, if you go back through every box score throughout the NBA playoffs, every single one, I would guess, and I looked this morning, so I know it's the last 5 or 6 days, right, of these games within the Eastern Western Conference Finals. I would guess if you go back, you can't find many, maybe a few, maybe a couple outliers, but you can't find many games where the winner of the game didn't handily win in either three-pointers made or efficiency. That's the game. It's the game in the regular season. It's the game in the postseason. And I think it leads to a lot of these lopsided games where, we want nail biters. Like we want the game to come down to the last few seconds. And there's been a few here and there in the NBA playoffs, but I think is the smallest margin of victory in the conference finals so far 6 points, more like 10, 12, 20, whatever. A lot of blowouts, a lot of games that just get lopsided fast, like last night, Heat and the Celtics. I mean, that's a must-win game for the Celtics. Well, Heat shut the lights out. See you guys, it's over. I mean, it feels like sometimes watching a home run derby. It just feels like, or a 3-point shooting contest. Like, who's going to hit the most threes? Well, they're going to win tonight. And I know there's variables of defense and fast breaks and all that, and like it leads to easier threes. I get it. Like, it's a chicken or the egg thing. Well, obviously, if you play poor defense and you allow open threes, they're going to make more. I get that. That's on the team that's getting rocked. But NBA playoff games, I felt like for 25 years I watched them, especially as it went on, right? Like the seeds got closer, the bigger games, higher stakes, conference finals. They were close games. Like they were usually close basketball games that were nail biters. And now because of the 3-point shooting, one team gets hot, one team gets cold. It can't be close. It's math. Can't be close. So that continues to stand out. If you're going to win, you got to win the three-point shooting contest. That is it. So a lot of lessons learned for the playoffs here so far. The Heat and the Nuggets on the verge of playing in the finals. Unbelievable. Appreciate everyone listening. Follow the podcast wherever you get your podcast at WIP Daily. And, of course, on the YouTube page for 94 WIP. We'll do the podcast a couple times a week live with video with Tucker Begley. Thank you for listening. We'll talk soon on WIP Daily.